The Stolen Generation was distinguished through thorough planning by the Australian federal and state government agencies, who created and passed laws allowing the systematic removal of approximately 100,000 Indigenous children over 90 years, until the 1970s when the policies began to be dismantled. This genocide had extensive impacts on the Aboriginal community. The immediate impacts included the emotional trauma, loss of identity and culture, and the isolation felt by children removed from their siblings and parents. The long-term effects of the genocide impacted the cultural, social, and economic aspects of Aboriginal life significantly through the loss of some tribes' language, intergenerational trauma, and unemployment and poverty for children taken. The genocide serves as a constant reminder of the upsetting actions of the government to allow the horrible nature of the genocide to go on for upwards of 90 years. According to the United Nations Genocide Convention Act of 1948, genocide is described as a crime committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group in whole or part. The Stolen Generation genocide represents this through the deliberate church policies created by the government targeting Aboriginal families and the forced abduction of children, such as the Aboriginal Protection Act of 1909, which granted the power to remove Aboriginal children from their family. Genocides can often follow the 10 stages of genocide. The Stolen Generations represent this through the stages of classification and dehumanization. The Australian government moved through the classification stage, which is defined as people who are divided into us and them. Aboriginal people were classified as separate and inferior by the government, with policies referring to Aboriginals as a dying race. As well as this, Indigenous Australians were also excluded from the census until 1967, further exemplifying the nature of the genocide. The Stolen Generation also represented stage 4 of the genocide, dehumanization. The government had a goal of breeding out the black, using terms like half-caste, implying that Aboriginal identity was undesirable or less human. This attitude was strongly reflected in the assimilation policy, which aimed to absorb Aboriginal people into white society, erasing their culture and identity. The level of dehumanization is demonstrated through the quote, "It was forbidden for us to talk in our own language. We weren't allowed to talk about anything that belonged to our tribal life." This quote by Muriel Olson highlights the disregard for Aboriginal humanity and identity, clearly conveying the nature of the genocide. The short-term political impact of the Stolen Generation was a separation from family, emotional trauma, and mistreatment and neglection. This was caused by the government's enforcement of assimilation policies that removed Aboriginal children from families. Economically, many children were placed into institutions or foster homes, where they were often used as unpaid labour, denying them education or financial opportunities. Culturally, these children were forbidden from speaking their language or practicing traditions. This impacted the Aboriginal culture through a loss of tradition and Aboriginal identity. As shown in Source 2, the image, "Homes are sought for these children," Aboriginal children were treated as property to be handed out, further disconnecting them from their heritage. Socially, many experienced racism and identity loss. Source 3 reflects this deep social and cultural harm. All the teachings we received from our foster family. Black people were bad. I wanted my skin to be white. This quote reveals the psychological damage of being made to feel inferior due to race, highlighting the immediate goal of cultural destruction and social exclusion. The political impacts continue today, with many survivors still seeking justice, apologies, and compensation. Trust in government systems remains low among Aboriginal communities because of the unforgivable events from the genocide. Economically, the trauma led to lower education levels, unemployment, and poverty. This is supported by Source 4, where only 13.3% of people who were taken rated their health as excellent, compared to 18.2% of those not taken, suggesting a link between poor economic access and long-term health. Culturally, generations have lost connection to country, language, and traditional knowledge. Many still struggle to reclaim identity and heritage. Socially, the effects include family disconnection, higher incarceration rates, and intergenerational trauma stemming from the genocide's violence and dehumanizing treatment towards the children. Aboriginal people who were removed have struggled to rebuild relationships, communities, and sense of self. Given the genocidal nature of these actions, targeting an ethnic group's identity and future, the long-term impacts reflect not just accidental damage, but deliberate destruction of Aboriginal people's political, economic, cultural, and social foundations. The stolen generation was genocidal in nature, aiming to erase Aboriginal identity through forced removal. Its short-term impacts included cultural loss and social trauma, while long-term effects continued politically, economically, and culturally. These outcomes demonstrate the deliberate and devastating intent behind the assimilation policies, fulfilling the criteria of a genocide.